Mr. Chair, you were live.
Welcome to the July 7th Planning Commission meeting. I'll call the meeting to order. Ms. Consoli, can we have the roll call, please?
Mr. Klein,
Present.
Mr. Waldman,
Present.
Mr. Svakianudis,
Present.
Ms. Butler,
Present.
Mr. Imes.
Present.
We don't have Mr. Sale yet. We're not expecting Ms. Rubio Dorsey. So we have 5 present, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And for the matter of the 2 public hearings, both Ms. Butler and Mr. Imes have watched the last meeting where that public hearing was open. So I just want to state that for the record. Okay, sharing the agenda here. Okay. First order of business is the approval of the June 16th minutes that Ms. Consoli sent around. Does anybody have any questions? I can display them if everybody would like. They're pretty straightforward. Has everybody had a chance to review them?
That's a yes for me.
Okay, would anybody like me to display them or?
I don't think it's necessary unless somebody hasn't seen
Okay.
it.
Well, I would entertain a motion to approve the meetings from June 16th.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any dissensions? Okay, they pass. Thank you. Okay, next item, we jump into our public hearings. Let's start off. So both of these public hearings are still open. Let's start off with RNC 2021-029, the major site plan review for 9 Eastern Avenue. And I believe we had no additional public comments submitted and nobody has signed up to testify.
That is correct. This is Cynthia as planner, and I have not received any public comments for this project nor the second project to be heard tonight either.
Great.
No one signed up to speak.
Okay. So at this point, I will go ahead and close the public hearing for number 1 now, and we can continue into deliberations. So this, if you remember, this is the one that had a bit of stormwater discussion that we talked about, and something that I want to make sure that we go over here, at least in a can be an abbreviated way, but just to mention the compliance with the R2NC design standards, because that's really what we're approving, that both of these projects comply with those design standards. So does anybody have any comments about the 9 Eastern Avenue project with respect to those design standards? The one thing that I will say is I think the staff report for both of these was very complete and showed line by line how they met the design standards. So I personally don't have anything to say beyond that. I think they all meet those. Anybody else have things they want to point out or?
No, I agree with you that it meets the standards.
But there was some discussion about the really rather, to me at least, startling and surprising and amazing landscape plan that was done. And I asked the landscape architect if he would be willing to prepare something for the use of us and the staff as to what good practices for these kinds of properties might be, for other properties might be in the future. So I don't know if he's here or not, or if that got done. Other than that, I think we're fine. I'm fine.
Is the landscape architect online if for this project?
Somebody's
I'm
raised
here.
their hand.
You're Sean Robinson.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Yeah, I did prepare something. I don't know if I can share my screen. I don't. Let me see if I can. Kinda good.
Sure. Yeah, let me stop and then you can go ahead and share it.
And
Just gonna at the bottom and hit share. What do you do? Share screen and
can everybody see that? Okay.
I
it hasn't come yet.
don't see it yet.
Might take a minute to.
Nothing's coming up at all. Usually we at least see a black screen.
It's just giving you guys a black screen.
It's not giving us
It's not giving us anything. It doesn't look like you're sharing.
Let me see something real quick.
Maybe it's on a other monitor or something.
Can you see it now?
There
It's
we go.
coming up now, yeah.
Okay, there you go. So these were some of the comments that were made that we kind of took together. And I think it was a very unique project in that I think it really could be a precedent for a lot of good things as it relates to stormwater. I mean, as we all know, we just had some really prolific storms last night, and it doesn't seem like these storms are going to get any better. But one of the questions was, what are the minimum requirements that take place for the city and other landscape architects working in the city? And we always felt like it was very important. There's just small improvements. And I think that us as consultants working closely with your constituencies and the jurisdictional side of things, it's important to understand how we can help people really see just how these small grading techniques and diversions and managing the water, it's really a game of inches. I think that it would be important for us to try to figure out ways that we can show that there's plants, for example, that could help reduce your erosion and helping homeowners understand these precedents. I think I'd say 9 out of 10 of our clients that are within the 100-foot buffer, the expanded buffer, or whether or not they're in the critical area. I mean, these are very intelligent people in respects to their professions, but a lot of times they just don't know what to look for. I mean, they're not walking along their property understanding that their gutters are clogged and that a lot of this stormwater, a lot of these problems are compounding. We're seeing people getting into positions where they're having to spend a lot of money on things that could have been really headed the other direction if it was addressed years ago. And I think this has really become more of the forefront in the past few years, just because we were seeing such bad events. The other thing that I think that it's hard for us to work together, because from the jurisdictional side and our side, I know I kind of present us as a team. I say, listen, the city of Annapolis or Anne Arundel County, like, we're here to work with you to get you the things that you want, but you also need to do other things. Like, what are the layers that are involved in this? How can we address issues that are compounding? I mean, people that live at the bottom of a drainage area are experiencing washouts, and they're the ones that are calling the Department of Public Works saying, why can't this be done, or what, and there's only so much money that's being allotted towards these improvement projects. but it really starts further up. And I think that what they're doing at 9 Eastern is something that it's setting the precedent for homeowners that it's a concession. Like, if you do certain things, then you get to do these certain things. And I think that the faultiness in the critical area law is that there's not I wouldn't call it like a pay to play, but ways that you could look at it from, okay, is it better if someone got another 20 square feet of net impervious lot coverage, but then they also did a lot more vegetative cover in an area that was really critical to the management of stormwater and making sure that erosion doesn't go into the bay. One of the other questions that was brought up was the maintenance. I mean, I think when a lot of people talk about maintenance, I always use the analogy as like every time we go into our kitchen and we cook, the first thing we do when we're done cooking is we wash our counters down. We clean and put the dishes away. It's these small residual tasks. Now, you don't have to do those things, because if you didn't do it in 5 years, your kitchen would have to be completely replaced and you'd be spending that same amount of money to redo it, and it'd be an exorbitant cost. It's the same thing with your outdoor space. I think that a lot of this stuff, and with managing the stormwater and the cleanup, I mean, it's work it's obviously not in a conditioned space. So when it's hot out, people don't want to do it, but understanding that there are certain ways to specify plants and do certain things that will compound and make that maintenance less and less as the years go on. So we really think that one of the hardest parts is just helping people understand that there is going to be some kind of stewardship with the property, especially when you live in these areas. I mean, the critical area is the last line of defense before it goes into the bay. I mean, we have discussions with clients all the times about, listen, you may not think your property's moving, but every year, it could be a quarter of an inch, 3/8 of an inch to an inch. The whole land is kind of subsiding. So we see, and we monitor this, and what can you do as far as plants that might be in these places to help mitigate that problem. And then lastly, I think one of the most important things that we're starting to see is, and more often, this is in Anne Arundel County in general, but there's just a lot of, when we go on the water and we're looking at these different types of projects, invasives are really starting to, they give us this false impression that these areas are vegetatively stabilized. But when you really go underneath and all that, you're going to see real erosion. You're going to see undercuts. You're going to see head cuts. When it rained 2 days ago on one of the creeks we were working on, it looked like chocolate milk. And I think that there's not enough emphasis put on these ground covers. They're inexpensive. They can cover a lot of ground. They're cost prohibitive, because then you're not going to have to mulch that space constantly. And I think that aesthetically, it's a better improvement to the property from a maintenance standpoint, and it's a lower barrier for making sure that you don't have to incur these incredible costs to deal with, waterproofing your basement because your house has got water intrusion, and dealing with a lot of these really expensive problems. And I don't know, I think that's going to be our biggest. I really appreciated the comment, because I feel like that's where it's really hard for us. And when I talk about us, like the city of Annapolis and a lot of the people that are really ingrained in these issues, to try to figure out ways to help people to understand these things. One of the things that we had always thought was, when someone moves to the area and if they do buy a property, or is property ownership within the critical area, like that, there's more a dissemination of information that they can look at, because a lot of people don't even understand what these words mean. When you say impervious, when you talk about native plants, when you talk about the riparian buffer, and all these different terms that get thrown around. But then in the end, I think when you look at these types of issues, it would really help us, because I think from a tax-based standpoint, is who wants to spend millions of dollars that are going to be needed to improve the stormwater management systems that likely we just don't have the funds to do. So it's like, how
So these would be like a catalog of best practices, frequently asked questions, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's like, how do we get property owners for the buy-in? I mean, I think this is a perfect example of like, here's somebody that is, I have another client that is on Weems Creek that has, probably planted thousands upon thousands of plants, of native plants on his hill, and he's effectively stopped the erosion. He had really bad erosion, and he's got peace of mind, because when you put a lot of the the onus on a lot of these larger plants like trees and shrubs, like, well, they're not going to be protected unless they have the balance of the understory canopy that protect their roots, because every time it rains, it's really eroding a lot of that soil away from the roots. They get compromised, and then they start moving. And I think it's got to be a condition of like us understanding like how to help people see these things, because there's just not enough people understanding these issues. And it's sad, because we see a lot of people that wish that someone had come along or that there was more information, even maybe on the city of Annapolis's website or Anne Arundel's website, about how to deal with these issues.
Yeah, I was going to make the suggestion to staff is that'd be a really great summer intern project for either an undergraduate student, or if it's in much more detailed, for a landscape architecture graduate student, to assemble a bunch of materials like that as a summer internship. Way to get some free labor to get a valuable project like that done.
And I would add that I'm an Anne Arundel County watershed steward, and so this is music to my ears. And I think one of the things that would be great is to put the information in a place that people that are buying property in a critical area can see and absorb quickly, get the information. But also maybe when we're doing reviews of plans in the critical area, we can look for the designation of I'm going to get the wrong designation, but Sean, maybe you can help me. There's a special designation for landscape architects that have the Bay certification for doing work in the critical area and understanding these important stormwater related best management practices.
Right. Yeah, I wanted to pull this picture up because these are very steep slopes. And if I showed you, and I can obviously come in whenever to show you different pictures, but there's a strategy here. These are the plants that you see. It's a native plant, not the hydrangea, but the plants that would look like grasses, and that's a rhizome. And what's great about that plant is it basically goes to work for us. If I put one to a 3 feet on center, within 3 years, they fill it in between, and they get a really dense fibrous root system that's going to protect these trees. It's going to protect the understory trees, the woody vegetation from all the real erosion. And then subsequently, you can come in between and start planting. Like this had another native plant, Tiarella, inside here, but then it gets people the visualization. They see the value, so they buy in. Homeowners will see this and they're like, great. It's an area that I have to maintain because I own it, but I can't grow grass there. So what can I grow there? But then subsequently, he doesn't have erosion. There's not sediment going into the bay, and we're getting stasis of the grades is what we want. We need to stop having these grades move around, and you're having all this erosion compound these issues. And I think it puts undue burden on a lot of the stormwater management facilities that just can't handle these storms anymore. But
and I think most importantly, these kinds of things don't block people's view, which is a lot of the, at least that I've seen, resistance of planting anything but grass.
Right. Yeah, I know that's a very good point, because we do tell people, like, the invasives will grow 3 feet in a year. This plant will only grow probably 16, 18 inches. And this is just one of thousands of different types of plants that we have options for. But it gets people to see the value of what they can do. And unfortunately, if this was grown with invasives, which is most likely 99% of all the other properties, they don't see what's going on underneath. And it's a network of very nominal root structures that aren't holding the soils in place. I mean, last year we had 4 different projects where they had, I'd call it like a mudslide effectively, where the land, I mean, you're talking about 20 to 30, 40 cubic yards of dirt just flew down the hill. And those are things that economically people don't have. There's no insurance money for that. They don't know, that's tens of thousands and sometimes, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to repair. Where this stuff is like, it's a very small incremental change that could make a big impact.
So do you think, Sean, it would make sense for us to recommend that when you're building in the critical area, any of these waterfront properties, that you work with an architect that has that certification that I'm talking about, that the Anne Arundel County Watershed Stewards, I think it's called the Bay Watershed Architect Certificate. It's becoming more widely used in the county, and it's exactly what you're talking about. It's using fundamental landscaping ideas that are using natives instead of, Pachysandra and English ivy for ground cover and things like that to stabilize hillsides. But I agree, I see houses all the time still being built or renovated where if the property owners had known about these different alternatives, they'd clearly use them. So maybe we can put this on our website, or I can talk with our planning department, but there's got to be some way to get this information more widely disseminated.
I agree. I think that having like a network and or a membership constituency, like where we all join and then we are sharing information. I think that's the one great thing about technology now is that I can say, it took us a few years to find some plants where we're like, okay, this is a good plant for a loamy, sandy soil in this condition. It loves the shade. And then,
there's a whole, the Watershed Stewards have its native plants for wildlife habitat conservation landscaping for the Chesapeake Bay watershed. It's right in front of me, and it's fabulous. It's put out by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and then there's rain gardens across Maryland, and it has all those plants. And in order to become a watershed steward, you have to know the plants and how to use them. But I think there's also this certificate for landscapers that if more people knew about this certification. And we recommended highly that building in those areas, people that want to build, we recommend that they use this kind of a landscape architect. That would be great. So I'll follow up with the people in our planning department to see if we can at least get that on the website.
Yeah, and I think it's a combination too with the grading, understanding. I think what they're doing at 9 Eastern is great because they're going to basically effectively. Because we can't historically go back and say, okay, the new stormwater management regulations say this. All these houses are already built. So how do you? So if someone's going to come in and say, listen, I'm going to now effectively manage my DA, my drainage area, where before I was just throwing it to the road and letting the next guy down the hill deal with it, which inevitably ends up being us, or the city or the Anne Arundel County. But here's a homeowner saying, you know what? I'm going to take onus of my stormwater and manage it on my site, even though I don't have to. But then what do they get? What do we do to incentivize them to do these things? That's the hard part.
Right. Yeah. And one of the other hard things is that we have homeowners that put in the rain garden at first. There's a good example at the corner of Chesapeake and 4th Street. And that was part of their stormwater management to get approved for all the impervious surface. And it always happens. A year later, they fill it in and they put grass. And we don't really have a good enforcement mechanism. So I think people know they can do that. And if they want grass, they'll do that. But I think by and large, what you're talking about is those landowners that are buying property on the waterfront, they may be more open to this kind of more sensitive landscaping and will keep it if they know about it.
Right.
And understand the benefits.
So thanks for putting that document together. Would you share that with us? You could share it, through Cynthia. And Mr. Waldman, would you like that added to the public record for this meeting, or we'll go from there? Or
No, of course. I'm doing some thinking and so forth. I think that's very good, Mr. Robinson. It's good. I mean, this information needs to be conveyed, and there may need to be some requirements, and we need to do some thinking about this. So that was a very good start. I'm glad that you responded, and I've learned a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for the question. I really appreciated it.
Yeah, thanks very much. So does with respect to our deliberations for this project. Does anybody else have any more comments about things we reviewed or the standards? And if not, I would
I can
entertain a
make a
motion.
motion to approve.
I would
The
second
9
that.
Eastern Avenue porch, enclosed porch.
Yeah. I'll second that. Any further discussion? All in favor of approving this project, say aye.
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 Aye. Any dissensions or
Abstentions.
abstentions?
Who knows?
Great. So I think, Kimberly, did you get all the hands? I think of the people who were here last time, we all were unanimously in favor.
Yes, I got that, sir. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mr. Robinson, stop sharing your screen, please.
Yep.
Yep.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank
Great.
you.
That's good.
Well, congratulations, folks. And again, we're very impressed with the forward leaning on the landscaping and stormwater management. So on behalf of the commission, thank you again, and good luck on your work. Okay, next project. Go back to this. This is also minor site plan. So it's RNC 2022-008 minor site plan review for 424 2nd Street. This was enclosing the porch underneath and rebuilding the deck. So we again, there were no comments received, no additional comments received, or people signed up to testify. So again, can close that public hearing. And similar to the other one, I'll just say that again, the staff report was very well done with respect to showing compliance with the R2NC standards. And that's all I had to say. Anybody have other comments and deliberations that you want to make on that?
Alex, I actually know Chuck and Sarah. They're neighbors of mine. But under our conflict of rules, I feel like I can make an unbiased decision. So I'd like to still be able to be part of the deliberations and vote on this, if that's possible. If anyone,
I think I don't have a problem with that.
okay, thank you. Hearing no problem, I think it's a good project, and I don't see any problems with it at all. So I think I will vote yes when the vote comes.
Yeah, this is a small town and we know lots of people, but if you feel it's not a conflict.
I know you can't recuse
Right.
yourself for everything.
Yeah.
I also think it's a good project, and the staff report was excellent. So I will have no issues with it either.
I feel like we put people through a lot of effort for something which is pretty minor.
Exactly.
But that's
Yeah.
the way Eastport wants it, so.
Yep. And, I think it like in the case of the Eastern Avenue, the Eastport Civic Association Architecture Committee, gives them standing to weigh in, and I think
Yep.
that's how they want it. And so that's,
Yeah, it's always good to have checks and balances.
Yep. I mean, that's the great thing about the way these things work is local neighborhoods can, for the most part, make up their own rules in a way, as long as it's legal and it fits in with the zoning. And so anyway, that's the process. But so I would entertain an emotion to approve this project.
I will make a motion to approve RNC 2022-008, the structure at 424 2nd Street.
I second.
Any further discussion? All in favor
Aye.
of approving?
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions or dissensions? Okay, great. Well, again, thank you guys for putting this this together, and good luck on your project. Okay, this brings us to our new business, and it's a mobility plan update by Eric Lashinsky, the Chief of Comprehensive Planning. And Eric is obviously known well to all of us, and hopefully to any folks watching. And so at this point, I will turn it over to Eric.
Thank you, Chair. Bear with me for just a moment while I download this presentation.
While Eric gets himself together, how are the findings for these two items going to be handled?
Yes, thank you. I meant to say that. So I think that we should distribute them, not to pick on our two newest members.
Alex, normally for projects like this,
Yeah,
because
let me finish. Yeah, let me finish. So we have our prior attorney, Mr. Beard, prepared some boilerplate findings that he distributed prior to his last time with us. But I think to give our two newest members some experience with how to prepare these, I would ask that Mr. Svakianudis and Ms. Rubio Dorsey take these two. And frankly, we have that. I think you guys all both have the stuff that was distributed by Mr. Beard, and could either use it as is because these were pretty simple, or if there's anything specific that we discussed that you want to add, we could add to that. But if you guys are all right, well, Tom, if you're okay with that, and I can talk to Teresa.
Fine with me, yep.
Okay, and in the next week, we can just maybe talk on the phone just to sort of go over the basic idea, but not a lot of work on these because Mr. Beard did a great job getting that ready.
so Alex, with projects, because you're actually not making a recommendation, but you're doing a final opinion.
Yep.
These are normally prepared by the attorneys because they are appealable decisions.
Understood.
So, you may want to consider having the new attorney work with staff on preparing these. That's what we
Okay.
normally do with this type of thing.
Okay, fair enough. And I'll circle back with our new attorney because we need to talk anyway. And maybe
Sounds
that's a good way to get some traction on some of our projects. But thanks for that suggestion.
I have a question, Mr. Pline. This is
Yep.
Cynthia. When would you expect those to be complete as far as being signed and everything? I know both of these applicants, and at least the one at 424 Second, is very anxious to get moving. This is a longer
Yeah.
process than they anticipated to begin with. And, the pretty straightforward project. So I know they're anxious to get their the findings adopted and signed and everything as quickly as possible.
Well, there's a draft that Mr. Beard did.
Right.
So
Yeah. I'll take those. I'll forward them to our new attorney and just to see if there are any questions about that. But
Sure.
hopefully we can get that done early next week.
Oh,
Right, and we can also forward, Cynthia can, when we get an email address for them, Cynthia can forward electronically the staff reports and the applications so that they have the background materials that they would have normally gotten that for projects.
Yeah, I can do some of that.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay, great. Thank you.
thanks. You bet.
All right.
All right.
Let me go
Take it away,
share
Eric.
Hmm. That is not what I want to show. Let's see here. All right. Hold on, I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment. Why is that not popping up? I'm sorry, guys. Okay, now I think we're good. All right. You can see this presentation now, I hope. Thanks again for the chance to present to you what I think is a major component of the comprehensive plan update that we're still working on. You know, I've been talking a lot about mobility ever since I got here 2 years ago. I joke that it was not in the brochure for my job, but it's something that connects to almost every issue in the city. So this is the basic agenda for what I want to talk about. I have a bunch of slides that will help to frame out where we're going with mobility in the city. And I should say I'm coming back in 2 weeks to give you an update on where we are at the comprehensive plan. That's going to be more of a accounting of what we have left to do, just to be really transparent about what we've done so far and what we have left to do. And we are continuing to finalize it. But tonight we're talking about mobility. So I'm going to start by talking about the planning context that to some degree I inherited. I've been building from. This is a quote that I've found to be extremely useful in talking about why I'd say almost 30% of my job right now focuses on mobility. Almost no matter what you want to do with cities, transportation is the fastest and most effective, cost-effective way of achieving your goals. He says, if you want to reduce CO2 emissions, if you want to advance social equity, if you want to foster small business success, if you want to increase land value, if you want to increase public health, if you want to reduce fatalities and injuries, transport is the place to do it. From San Francisco's MTA chief, in an article that appeared in Wired magazine a few months ago. Many plans have been done. You know, you might sometimes question why people watching might be question why we do so many plans. Sometimes they're redundant. Sometimes they don't get implemented. Sometimes they don't get adopted. This is the set of plans that I'm working from that many of which I inherited. Some have been done by Anne Arundel County, some by the city. Many of them have not been adopted. And so I would say, you know, from a vision perspective, although I'm not there yet in the presentation, adopting plans is extremely important, especially when they've been well vetted by the communities. They get held up for various reasons. And you know, sometimes when you wait too long to adopt, they become not relevant anymore, or you know, just out of date. You have a new city council, you have new staff, you know, and there's a couple in here that I think are getting to that place. But the West Annapolis Master Plan was the first project that I worked on here. It's part of the comprehensive plan, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. The Vision Zero strategic plan was just adopted by the county executive a couple days ago. Talk about that as well. So Vision Zero, many of you are probably familiar with this term. It's a philosophy and a strategy towards the elimination of roadway deaths and fatality, accidents and fatalities, I'd say. Jurisdictions all over the world have adopted Vision Zero action plans. Anne Arundel County did so recently, and I was part of a task force that helped to write this plan. I'm encouraging the city council to adopt this as well. It's important because safety, what I've found in my work, safety is a metric that helps to change how things get done. It's planners and engineers may not always agree on the best way to do things, but when safety is the top priority, the design will follow, and all the other policies that are needed to ensure safety. And so there's a disturbing trend in that you can see in this chart here, where we're really not seeing fewer crashes on roadways, or at least they're not going up too much, but they're kind of hovering, and we're really not seeing a whole lot of change. And so this plan is aimed at reducing those, and it really focuses on these 4 categories that we found are generally what trigger accidents. Infrastructure is essentially a way of thinking about design, but human behavior, vulnerable road users, and road user age. And then this chart here, the 6 E's that we call them: emergency services, enforcement, engineering, engagement, evaluation, equity. Sometimes jurisdictions only use 4 E's. We chose to use 6 E's. We just figured that all of these E's are part of the solution, and this is only going to be as good as the implementation. But like I said, it's if we prioritize safety, I think the design will follow, and we'll see a reduction. West Annapolis Master Plan. This one, it's focused more on land use, I would say, than anything else. But within it, you see the DNA of a kind of a change in paradigm for how we want the city to develop, where we want a more walkable development rather than more auto-oriented development. And so we did this plan because the commercial area of West Annapolis was seen as a place that was ripe for this type of change. Nearby residents were asking for it. They wanted to be able to walk to more retail and services. And so that's what this plan is aimed at. It's become basically a jumping off point for a broader look at zoning reform in the city that we're doing through a form-based code initiative that I've shared with you all previously. Not the sexiest cover for a plan, but this is a really important one. This is the Forest Drive Task Force final report. It came about because there was some, I would say, criticism and lack of support for the Forest Drive Eastport sector study that was done prior to me starting here, and the task force was created as a kind of response to address what may have been missing from that plan. And there's many things in this report that we're using in our comprehensive plan. I'm just showing a few here, but I think it lays out, a pretty clear vision for what we want Forest Drive to be. There's a number of really excellent transit ideas that I can imagine being very effective in reducing the number of cars that have to go up and down Forest Drive every day for commuting reasons. It generally supports a lot of the things we have in the comp plan. This plan from 2016, I don't find people talk about enough. It has a lot of good ideas for an area of the city that comes up a lot when we talk about congestion and street conflicts and it has ideas on how to manage parking better and one-way streets. And I'm looking to advance some of what is in this plan in the comprehensive plan. And
Can I
then
interrupt? Was that one online anywhere?
it is. These are all online. And this one actually had a number of appendix documents that are really excellent. There's one that was kind of a parking study. There's so yeah, I encourage.
Eric, thank you so much for using this, because the city did pay, very competent consultants to do this, and we had worked with them very long and hard, and there were some good recommendations. So I'm thrilled to see that you've actually read it. Thank you.
Thank you. Upper West Street sector study. Basically it is advancing a vision for Upper West Street, essentially from Westgate Circle to Solomon's Island Road, that is more walkable and privileges, kind of mixed use development, transportation improvements, placemaking, and in this you will find some good information about the West East Express Trail project, which has become kind of a signature trail initiative that I'll talk about more in a bit. This one is not this plan is not adopted. It was very well supported by the community, and so I'm trying to get this one adopted because it is quickly running out of time, I think, as a 2016 study. Finally, in 2011, the city did its first bike master plan. Most of these recommendations are still extremely valid. We have started some and stopped others, but I think we've had the most momentum over the last 4 or 5 years in pushing these forward, and a lot of them are really in the works right now, and I'm going to talk about those in a minute. These are just the plans from that show all of the priority corridors and connections. You can't really see very well, but finally, just to wrap up this group of kind of existing plans. I mean, this is a map that I borrow from our regional bike advocacy group that shows the big picture of where Annapolis fits in this region from a bike perspective, and it's really helpful to kind of see that we're not holding up our end of the bargain here. We're a important linchpin to this kind of regional loop. The county is quickly moving on the South Shore Trail project and the Broadneck Trail project, and we're starting to get some momentum on the projects within the city that'll help to connect all of this. When we talk about the things that we've learned as we've done our comprehensive plan work, we started with a series of themes that were really simmering even prior to COVID, but they've been reinforced by COVID. And you think about mobility, it's not hard to understand how all of these 3 themes, equity, health, and resilience, play into how we move around, how the built environment is something that guides how healthy we are, how long we can live. It's also a key to our survival of the city, and from an equity perspective, although I'm showing a picture of a dilapidated pier here, a lot of people don't have a choice for how they get around the city, and that's kind of, when I think about equity and mobility, that's one of the biggest aspects to keep in mind, that people just frankly don't have a choice in many cases how they get around if they don't have a car. We came up with a number of principles on the right, and this ultimately is the structure for the comprehensive plan. Transportation fits in specifically to the functional city. And so when you look at the table of contents for the comprehensive plan, you can see under functional city, we have transportation, we have community facilities, and we have arts and culture, but it's embedded in the comprehensive plan, but yet many of the themes of mobility are going to be seen throughout, certainly in land use, municipal growth, community facilities, which touches on trails and connectivity, and then environmental sustainability. You know, we talk about issues related to stormwater impacts and heat island impacts. And so social vulnerability is at the core of the comprehensive plan. I've talked about this many times in past presentations. I just will say that it was a way for us to ground who are these communities in the city, these populations that are most at risk. We use the CDC's methodology to do that. For people who know Annapolis, you know, you may not be surprised to see where these darker, most socially vulnerable communities are in the city. You know, this is the Clay Street corridor here in dark blue, and then you have the Forest Drive corridor here. And, you know, when you look at that in comparison to a population chart on the left, where you can see the diversity of the city along the southern axis, kind of along Forest Drive, that's an important correlation there. You can see the multicolored dots represent different racial groups. So orange is Black or African American, purple is Asian alone, the magenta is Hispanic or Latino, and the blue is white alone. And so you can see that kind of racial breakdown as you move north in the city, and that how that aligns with the social vulnerability map. And then when you look at kind of specifically transportation corridors in the city, on the left, you have our functional classification, interstates, principal arterials, minor arterials. You get the sense of the major roadway network of the city. And on the right, you see where the concentrations of accidents, crashes are occurring. This is actually just 2015 to 2019, but I mean, these are the chronic hotspots in the city, and they show up, you know, along these same places where you see social vulnerability in our major corridors of the city. And you have a bike network that is fragmented, doesn't help people get around currently. It's not safe, you know, for people who are questioning whether they're comfortable riding on the roadways. This bike network is not going to do it for them. But they will feel better at the Navy Marine Corps loop or on the Poplar Trail, but most of these are on street bike facilities. And then, you know, the walk score map is candidly, it's not really looking at the design of this. Is more about concentration of retail and activity, walking activity for retail, but it really shows the gaps in their walking network in the city. And when you look at those gaps, I mean, this is what you see on the right. You see kind of an auto-oriented development along Forest Drive and Upper West Street. And these are the kind of things that we're looking to address with our form-based code initiative, which is a kind of zoning reform initiative.
Hey, Eric, can you put
Yeah.
your PowerPoint on full screen?
Yeah.
Because that last chart was really interesting and I couldn't see.
You know what? I'm using just this Google PowerPoint. I'm not sure. But what I can do is I can just blow it up for a sec. Is this the one you were looking at?
Yeah, I was trying to understand what those colors were and what.
Yeah. So I should have had a key here. I mean, essentially, the green are these walkable places in the city, generally speaking. Or this is the walk score is a sort of a trademarked methodology for, you know, real estate industry uses it a lot to talk about whether a place is walkable, but it has a lot to do with concentration of retail. So, you know, I wouldn't necessarily consider this area Bay Ridge Road to be very walkable, but it's showing up as a little bit of green. But you have, you know, the Parole area, downtown, Inner West Street, a little bit of West Annapolis and Eastport, certainly. But then it kind of shows the gaps in between. So that's really the kind of goes green to purple, I guess, is the.
Yep. Okay, thanks.
Sure. So this is a slide I'm borrowing from a consultant who's working with us on the form-based code. You know, when you start to think about how those corridors end up shaping how we live, this is a really effective way to kind of see how a sort of medium, quote unquote, medium density corridor could be on the left or it could be on the right, which is Alexandria, Virginia. And you can start to see that when you have mixed use development, you combine compatible land uses in closer proximity to each other, think residential over top of retail, you get a different type of experience, and it's good for economic activity. It's good for environmental performance and walkability and health. And so that's sort of the direction we're heading in. And to do that, we start with our future land use map, where we are showing in red more of these places where we want mixed use development. And it's heavily along those currently auto-oriented corridors, Forest Drive, West Street, a little bit on Bay Ridge Avenue and Spa Road and Chinkopin, Solomon's Island Road, or Old Solomon's, I should say. So that's really where we're going in terms of the relationship between mobility and land use. So now just gonna end, I still have quite a few slides, but I'm gonna end with vision. Don't worry, I don't have 64 slides. I think there's something more in the back, but I just wanna go through, in terms of a framework, we really have 4 major goals in the comprehensive plan that address mobility and sort of build off of what I was saying we've learned in our analysis and in the plans that already exist. Goal 1 is about shifting the mix of mobility investments towards active modes, meaning biking and walking, public transportation, micromobility, ride sharing, and support for telework options to double the usage of these modes of travel to work by 2040. So clearly our lives have changed during COVID. There's a lot of people who are not commuting anymore, which I think is better for health. That then changes mobility patterns in the city. You know, that's just one aspect of how the city has changed. But I mentioned that there's a lot of people don't have a choice right now in how they get around. And even people who want to walk or bike don't feel safe doing it. So it's really kind of, these are not in order of priority, but this is probably the most important. We have been shortchanging other modes of travel in the city at the expense of you know, the auto-oriented mode. You know, I borrowed this one from, what does it mean to be a bicycling friendly community? There's a rating system from an organization that basically helps communities become more bicycle friendly. And this is how they explain it. You know, the goals are to reduce congestion, parking, increase local business tourism, reduce air and water pollution, improve population health, improve transportation equity and safety, increase biking, walking, and micromobility. And they give you the strategies, and we're kind of addressing a lot of these in the comprehensive plan. It's not, you know, I just want to underscore this. It is not about taking, you know, forcing people to do anything, really. It's about providing choices for people who might choose to move around in a different way. And that's what it's all about. We are a city that I'm not a fan of the term built out, but we're not expanding roadways in this city. When I mean built out, we're not adding new roadways. We're not widening them. All we can do is enable people to feel more comfortable getting out of their cars. And that's why I spend so much time talking about biking and walking and transit. It's not because I hate driving around. That's the way I get around, frankly, a lot of the time. But unless we take some cars off the roads, we're not going to really put a dent in congestion issues. So when we talk about the bike network, we've really zeroed in on these key gaps that we think, are going to help to make people feel more comfortable in getting around, that really try to fill in the network, the connected network. And these dark green dotted lines are those key gaps. Many of them are in some phase of design. We've been fortunate to get funding in the last several years from different programs. And so you can see a major feasibility study was done to link the Navy Bridge into downtown via King George Street. And that project is now fully funded by the state and Anne Arundel County, who are doing a cost sharing agreement. It'll take quite a while to get this thing done, but they are starting to move on that project, which is a thrill for me. And then the Poplar Trail extension to South Shore Trail feasibility study on this Upper West Street extension, the Poplar Trail, that was done 2 years ago by the county. The city was a major stakeholder in that, and we have since picked up that and are moving that project forward with additional funding that came from the state. And of course, as you all should know by now, the West East Express is really the big idea in here. It's the old, much of it is the old WB&A rail line. I corrected the train station. Alex, I think this was a comment that you had at a previous presentation, but we were showing the B&A Railroad Depot, but this is the depot that was at Inner West Street at Calvert once upon a time. And so you have a railroad corridor that's partially turned into a trail in the 90s, the Poplar Trail. It doesn't really connect to much currently. And so we're simply trying to extend it eastward to downtown and westward to Parole, and ultimately to connect to Waterworks Park. But that is in collaboration with Anne Arundel County. So this is the way we're kind of conceptualizing it from a design, as we move through the phases of the project. It's an east extension, a west extension, and enhancements to the Poplar Trail. And we're just about to start the Poplar Trail design enhancement phase. We haven't designed anything yet, but we got the funding to go up to 30% design on that. And so we're going to be kicking that off soon, probably in August. And then on Forest Drive, we have a lot of pieces that are in play right now. Still some big gaps to fill though, but the pink ones, the magenta dotted lines are all projects that are in some phase of planning or design, where I'm kind of identifying who's doing it or what the program is that's funding it. So Anne Arundel County is currently doing a major design project to try to fix Chinkopin, the intersection at Chinkopin, Forest Drive, and Ayers T. Allen. I was just in a 2-hour meeting this morning about that. It's no easy feat. They're looking at also a shared use path along the south side of Ayers T. Allen. So that's why that shows there. The villages at Providence Point, which you all approved recently with conditions, is providing a huge extension of the shared use path on Forest Drive that'll wrap around Spa Road down to Hunt Meadow. We're working on a design extension of the Hilltop Lane bike corridor to connect to Forest Drive. We're having a public meeting on July 20th. I'll talk about it in a minute. And then the Parkside Preserve project is formalizing the extension along Old Annapolis Neck to Quiet Waters. And then we recently put a grant application in that I feel good about, that would be looking at a Bay Ridge Avenue improvement, essentially a safety improvement along the entire length of Bay Ridge Avenue, really from the Spa Creek Bridge to Quiet Waters Park. And so that's the Baltimore Metropolitan Council's Transportation and Land Use Connections Program. That's what BMC TLC stands for. Recent grant awards. This is when I showed up 2 years ago. This grant application had been put in and we ended up getting it, and it really has launched a lot of work on our Bikeways program. It's a grant from MDOT's Bikeways program, and it kind of got us in the pipeline. So they start investing in these projects and they want to see them through. And so as long as you can kind of stay on schedule and be responsive, they want to keep funding these projects. So we've gotten subsequent grants, the West East Express, so the upper West Street section and the Poplar Trail improvements we got funded this past year, and that's the project that's going to be starting soon. I should say this is a good view of that existing, abandoned rail line corridor behind Annapolis Gardens, West Street. We're looking west, so town center here, and this is this 40-foot wide corridor behind these homes and businesses that's pretty much underutilized right now. And then on the right is the existing Poplar Trail looking east towards downtown. Recent grant submissions. So we put in a really big grant for construction of the West East Express. We still need to finish designing it, but trying to get ahead of these things since they take so long. This is, I believe, the largest grant we've submitted an application for in the history of the city. $3.7 million from the Federal Transportation Alternatives Program. We're going to find out in about a week whether we are recommended for that. Fingers crossed. We just put in a follow-up application for the College Creek Connector, which is something I'm going to share towards the end of this. It's connecting King George Street to Calvert Street along this College Creek waterfront. And then this Bay Ridge Avenue corridor is what I was just talking about. I get a lot of comments from people who would simply like to travel Bay Ridge Avenue with their kids or by themselves or with friends, and they don't feel safe doing it, connecting downtown to Quiet Waters Park. And so we're going to look at what might be possible along that. Feasibility, the micromobility program, it's something I'm not ashamed to say I'm very proud to have helped launch here in the city. I know it's had its share of complaints over the last few weeks since it started in mid-May, but we've actually started pretty conservatively. There's just 50 e-bikes and 50 scooters in the city. It has been heavily used. It's got kicked off with an event at the Eastport Shopping Center on May 17th, I believe. We are still tweaking the system to make sure it works. It's not conflicting with other things going on in the city, but you can see here we're the top chart is showing the number of both scooters and e-bikes on over the last month or so. The blue being, I should say the black line being total rides. So we're getting up to the 300 rides a day. And then the blue is the average number of vehicles on the street. It goes by this chart on the this axis on the left. So we're not even really having, we have 100 maximum available. We're not really even getting up to 100 total vehicles in the city. It's a very small program as far as these things go. We're trying to be conservative and see how it works. But
Just for comparison purposes,
yeah.
it kind of at a order of magnitude, how does it compare to the usage for the prior PACE?
Yeah, the PACE was that program that the city had prior to COVID, which was just conventional. every city that's doing a program like this is doing e-bikes at this point. So that was really the option. There's no comparison. I think from what we didn't have data throughout the whole period that we did the pace bike system, but it was, under 50 rides a day. This is, we're getting at the max. This is over 300 on weekends at this point. And it fluctuates during the week, but you can see total distance traveled. This is 480 miles on June 28th. Let's see, 430 miles, July 4th weekend, 380, I think, the next day. The number of rides per vehicle on the far right column here, you can see get up to 3 rides per vehicle a day is probably the highest, 3.7. So it's being heavily used. These maps really, everything is kind of contingent upon where the vehicles are placed in the beginning of the day, and as they move throughout the day, sometimes they're relocated to provide better access. The fleet operator gets information on how long these vehicles have been sitting idle in certain locations, and they prioritize picking them up and moving them based on that. So they want them to be used, but you can see a lot of them are still really starting in the downtown area, but they're getting out to the farthest edges of the city. And so we're probably going to start moving them around more to make them more available. And this is interesting data. It's just a snippet of 1 week in June. We asked for this data. It's not the standard data that they give us. We have a dashboard where I pulled most of that data from that is kind of a real-time dashboard of data. This is just 1 week in June that shows the activity on the streets of the city. This trail that's going out beyond the edge of the city, we were told they were taking the vehicles to be charged, and they were in a truck and still active. But you can start to see the streets that are getting the use, and we think this can help make the case for improvements to those roadways, showing that these are the streets that people want to use or tend to use to get places. So we think this kind of data could be really helpful. It's a little like a Strava map that some of you may be familiar with. Goal 2, I don't have as many visuals for the rest of these, don't worry. Goal 2, build a policy environment that is mode neutral, equitable, and oriented to safety. Really, it's related to that first goal, but the basic idea is we want to design our streets to privilege all modes of travel and really not make decisions for people. We want the streets to be accessible and to just about anybody, and oriented to safety. And one of the best resources I've used to understand what that looks like is design manuals that come out of this organization, the National Association for City Transportation Officials, NACTO. They produced a whole series of guidebooks. They have visuals like this that really help to show what streets in different contexts should look like to be complete, meaning they have all of the accoutrements for people who are walking, rolling, biking, driving, and start to help understand where we need to go. And we're obviously constrained in this city. Most of our streets don't have enough space to have everything. So we need to start prioritizing what is most important. And that's why, I mentioned that in the Eastport transportation study, this recommendation of turning some streets into one-way streets, not everybody likes that idea. It certainly changes how you get around. But you can imagine that if some of those streets that are incredibly constrained today only had one lane of travel, what else you could do on that street to make it more hospitable to more people. It's just one application. And then our update, this is on the left, the map that will be in our comprehensive plan for our updated bike network, showing the priority corridors in red, and different types of bike facility. On the right, we're showing this walk zone to all of our schools in the city. Safe routes to school is important. It's just one population of the city that wants to be able to walk or bike to school. But if we can prioritize those investments, and there's a lot of funding out there for safe routes to school. So we think a map like this can help us access some of that funding and prioritize investments. Goal 3, transportation will take a leadership role in creating a greener and healthier Annapolis to sustain the economic, environmental, and social quality of the city. Clearly, we live in a city with a lot of waterfront, where water quality is of the utmost importance. It's not always the best, particularly after a rain event. Our roadways are the primary conduits for a lot of the runoff that goes into the waterways. We could be doing more to make those more of an agent in improving the environmental quality of the city. And it kind of comes down to stormwater features, which are also part of that complete streets idea. But it's also about tree canopy and making these streets have the adequate shade they need for pedestrians. If we're going to ask people to walk or bike, the streets have to be more hospitable. So this is one of the best ways of explaining what that might look like. We have the bike network, are primarily lines, but we've done this greenway map with the Annapolis Conservancy Board to highlight existing and future conservation opportunities in the city. It sometimes feels like we're squeezing more and more out of a very limited amount of space. It's hard to imagine there's that much more to conserve, but there are a lot of places. Some of them are very small parcels that are key connections, or places that we always thought were conserved but aren't. Many of them aren't really developable, frankly, but they're also not really in any sort of permanent conservation place at this point either. So what we're actually going to have in the comprehensive plan is a series of greenway, smaller neighborhood greenway concepts that overlay on top of this. You can start to see some of them, but certainly around College Creek is one of those opportunities. And I just learned about some new connections behind Germantown East Elementary, and we're working on a water access plan that kind of ties into this. So, and then electrifying our ways of getting around is the other side, other kind of big aspect of this goal. We have an RFP out for a consultant to do a feasibility study for electric ferry route. This would be kind of a pilot ferry that would run from Eastport to City Dock. You can see that's the route in blue. We're already in the process of budgeting to turn our free circulator shuttle, the pink one that you see around town, into an electric bus. And then we're also looking at a new shuttle service on the Eastport side that can help to get people to the ferry and to other commercial destinations. Since we want to be kind of mindful that if we're trying to attract people to this new ferry, there's clearly going to be a need to park, and we're trying to be ahead of things in terms of how that will work. But this is really the beginning of trying to electrify all of our public transit in the city, as well as our fleet vehicles. And it's just kind of the beginning, but it's where we're starting. Goal 4, last goal for the presentation. It's really an extension of what we already do. We already partner with all of these other jurisdictions around and that overlap Annapolis. We need to do more of that. It's very difficult to do anything here without those partnerships. They all require a certain amount of coordination. The Forest Drive Task Force was really pushing a lot of this. Forest Drive is a primary example. I mean, the Anne Arundel County owns and manages Forest Drive, but the city has the real estate on both sides, manages that. So we are working with Anne Arundel County on 2 Forest Drive initiatives right now. And there's other partnerships with the Housing Authority, with community organizations, with business associations, and certainly with MDOT, SHA, naval installation. We're partnering with the National Park Service a lot. And so this is one example of what that looks like. This is the College Creek connector, second to last slide here, trying to connect from King George Street on the right here to Rowell Boulevard, underneath Rowell Boulevard, coming out alongside St. Anne's Cemetery, and then connecting to Calvert Street and the start of the West East Greenway. To do a project like this, we're partnering with St. John's College, we're partnering with the Housing Authority and the Bloomsbury Square community, we're partnering with St. Anne's Parish, and we've met with all these groups, and this design has evolved following meetings with these stakeholders. And initially it was going to use the gravel trail that's already existing on St. John's waterfront. We kind of moved it off onto the water side after meeting with St. John's, and I think it makes for a better project. And so we're continuing to evolve this design. It's just one example. I think if you look at College Creek overall, there are many different owners of land on the waterfront. Much of it is public, but just not accessible today. So that's where a lot of these partnerships are going to come to bear. And finally, I'm just ending with just a plug for an event on July 20th, partnership event to advance our Hilltop Lane connector trail. Heritage Baptist Church is hosting this event. Pastor Scott Shelton is a passionate bike pedestrian advocate for Forest Drive, and I met him through the South Forest Business Association meetings, and we're grateful that he's hosting this event, and hope to have a lot of the neighbors along Forest Drive and Hilltop at this meeting. So that's the presentation. Thank you for your listening, and happy to take questions.
Anybody want to lead off?
I'll jump in. Wow, Eric, that was fantastic. Oh my gosh. I can't believe how much you've been able to do since you took over this project. It's kind of mind blowing. So thank you there's so many aspects I would comment on, but
yeah.
I just want to ask a couple questions instead. Overall, it's amazing. I was just thinking about the Greenway map. I'm sorry, I have a bad cold. And you mentioned that there are several places that are not necessarily conserved, but aren't that useful. Is there a move afoot to actually put money into formally conserving these places, getting them deeded to the city? Because just in Eastport alone, I've seen 4 or 5 places go away to private landowners on either side of these access areas, and no one's stopping them. So I don't know if we can stop the bleeding right now. Is there money to do that, I guess is the question.
Well, the comp plan is going to have some priorities, the places that we think are most at risk. And there are actions already underway to put some of these in, the Hawkins Cove piece is one of those.
But that's public. In a way that makes sense. No one's going to take that, but
right,
a lot of these street end and alleyway parks, neighbors put up fences and then they say, well, we've had it for this long, it's adverse possession, it's gone. And I just am trying to make sure and in a lot of cases, you mentioned it, and Ellen Moyer, we were in disbelief talking about all the places that we thought the city owned as street end parks, and we don't. So there was just an assumption that because we were, greenscaping the pocket park for the last 20 years for greenscape, and, the city mows the lawn there, that they were protected. So I just want to make sure if there's money that we can set aside, we prioritize those areas that are most at risk in terms of not the big ones like Hawkins Cove, because that can't go away. You know what I mean? It's the smaller ones.
Privately owned.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Some privately owned, but some street ends that are not owned. Yeah, they're public, but what happens is the neighbors put up fences to block them.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm regularly surprised by how many of the street end parks aren't really, don't have the clear title, and
Yeah. And that's what I'm hoping the law firm that we just hired, maybe we can get a little project and get some grant money that just does that right away, gets these things saved, conserved formally. But I'll touch base with you again about that, and maybe our law firm that's representing us for the planning commission. But also the electrification, I really enjoyed the slides you had for what that looks like. I noticed that you have some routes that go for Eastport Shopping Center, and then it's sort of Eastport Terrace Harbor House is isolated at the little island. How did that happen?
I should explain that. So this was kind of an initial map that the Eastport Terrace Harbor, part of that is, looking at potentially a future ferry connection there through Hawkins Cove,
Right.
but also wanting to link, and maybe it's just because the Eastport Shopping Center might be a hub that would be distance from Eastport Terrace Harbor House, but I think the route might certainly go up Madison Connect. But yeah, it does look like it's pretty isolated, right? It's not
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense if it did connect, but I just figured you thought about it, and I was curious about, why that wasn't mentioned. But those are just my two comments. And plus, I'm also thrilled about the work you're talking about doing on Bay Ridge Avenue to make that more bike friendly, because I know a lot of people in my area that would love to just ride over to Quiet Waters Park, and it is really treacherous. And we also ride down to Thomas Point Light, and just the worst part of it is getting through Bay Ridge. So good on you for getting that grant money going. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot with this kind of projects, I mean, you don't necessarily need to take the whole, it doesn't need to, it's not the kind of design that necessarily needs to go through like a long, 100% construction document. I mean, a lot of times it's with a conceptual schematic plan that show if there's striping that needs to change, or we're looking at whether flexi post, or there's various practices at play in other cities for buffering, protecting bike lanes. Some of them aren't really maintenance friendly, and so we're looking for that consultant to give us some advice on it. But it's the kind of thing where if a design firm could kind of show us essentially what it would be, then I think we could run with it. It wouldn't necessarily be a huge project to kind of retrofit, but a lot of it is just contingent on the right of way.
Great, thank you so much.
Pretty amazing amount of work you've accomplished in 4 years, 5 years.
2.
How many years you been here?
I've just been here for 2 years.
That's all?
I'm aging.
I know, exactly. Isn't it amazing?
Amazing. It's really, you've really gotten a grip on stuff in an amazing way, and gotten so much grant application out there. And have to sit in all these meetings with all of these different stakeholders. It's really good. With respect to Poplar Park Path, we're in the process of, we're constituted the committee. Our first meeting will be in a little while. We'll let you know what we think, and you'll come and give you'll present. and we'll get started. But we're ready to work with you and do it. And we've got some ideas on how to create a protected bike lane and separate it off from the walkers. So anyway, that's just my little turf.
Looking forward to it.
I think it's going to be, I think what you guys are thinking is pretty amazing. I hope you got time to do it. Good.
Well, I need to just say, I mean, I'm encouraged to do all these, you know, we have I say it all the time, but there's a lot of momentum, you know, from the top down at the city right now to do these kind of projects. I mean, it's not, I'm not sure, I enjoy them, but there's just an incredible amount of encouragement from, you know, city manager and the mayor and the city council, and, you know, to do this kind of work. So it's good to feel like we have that momentum right now.
I've always thought based on what Diane said, I've always thought that a shuttle running from someplace in the heart of Eastport out to the shopping center and then even out to Hillsmere to the Bay Ridge Center would make sense. Some form of, yeah, right. And whether it's, you know, government run or whether it's entrepreneurial and regulated, I don't know, but it looks like it's just asking, especially as parking becomes more and more difficult and expensive. It just looks to me like it would make sense. You have a photograph of the trolley. Is that up and running as part of this whole plan? The 10-minute trolley?
That's not running yet, but that's the type of vehicle that might be the option for that, those kind of the shorter shuttle routes. You know, I'm showing one for downtown as well. That was kind of the original idea, but and that still might be the case, but it does overlap a bit with the shuttle we already have. The idea was it was be more nimble and it would take smaller streets and not really be as reliant on you know, kind of get stuck in traffic and stuff, you know, on Main Street. So but that was the idea. You know, that's kind of what we're going to look at and this part of the feasibility study. What's the demand? What's the potential demand? Is this vehicle well suited for that? What are the maintenance needs? And the idea would be to contract out initially and see if feasibility will kind of tell us if the city should own and operate a system like that or contract it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. It's amazing. Amazing.
Yes, so I'll dovetail on the microtransit piece. I really would like to at least see more, you know, how that does dovetail with our existing transit system. I've sort of made that criticism in the past that, you know, we have our transit system, but it's never even talked about within the context of these other microtransit things. And I get it, they're different things and they work differently, but I'd like to at least see it acknowledged how the two would work synergistically. And if that thought process is happening, at least to acknowledge it. So it doesn't look like they're just operating in completely separate, isolated silos. So that's one piece. And just in general on the idea of transportation options that, you know, no matter what we want to do, we just cannot, and you know, you hinted at this, but we just cannot scale auto-based transportation in the city, even if we wanted to, we couldn't. And, you know, even at that, it wouldn't make sense, just because that's, you know, that was tried in the 60s in many places in the world, and it destroyed many places. So we just, you know, we're a planning organization, and we're looking at not just like what happens next week, but what we want this place to, how we want it to function in 20 years. And that, you know, that includes, you know, a lot of younger people who might not have the same ideas that all of us have. So I'm really happy that you're looking at ways to do things differently than just the same old. Thanks.
thanks for, that's well said. I mean, the scaling, we're not, we're not going to be growing as fast as other places in terms of pop, but a lot of that is hindered by the geography here. But even the amount of population that we will add, you're absolutely right. We can't scale with just auto-oriented transportation. So.
Through the chair, I just wanted to, I think, Eric, you did a great job tonight. It was a great presentation, particularly helpful for me being new to the city. And a couple things I wanted to ask. You mentioned some of the studies like the West Street, Outer West Street study that hasn't been adopted. And that's really more or less, I mean, in a way, I guess it doesn't talk about transit, but it's a former transit corridor, and it sort of evokes that more mixed use, denser development. And I'd like to hear some of your thoughts about both mobility planning, but also the comprehensive plan. We sure in this country need to get away from talking about transportation and land use separately. We have to talk about it together. That's been sort of, I think, the tragedy of planning in America, where plans are made and then you kind of try to figure out the transportation problems afterwards, or vice versa. You put in a highway, but you don't put in good land use planning to control what happens once the transportation system's in. Any thoughts on that? Are we going to talk about transit-oriented development or anything? And the other thing I wanted to ask is, I guess the only regional aspect of this mobility effort is trails. Are we going to have any language in our comprehensive plan to talk about the hope for return of rail, regional rail access to Annapolis? Annapolis seems sort of isolated from Baltimore and Washington in terms of railroad access. Just some of those thoughts I had.
I'm glad you brought it. I debated putting, there's a graphic that really a lot of the work on the regional public transit rail specifically is bus and rail, I guess, is being done by, and there's a Central Maryland transit plan that does have 2 connections from Annapolis as priority. Well, they're like the long range priority. We don't get a lot of love from the regional transportation entities, and so we do need to have those in the comprehensive plan and just kind of stay focused on them. But it's something I think kind of goes to that partnerships goal. I think the more we can start to advocate for it, the better chance. We kind of have to go through the county as part of that.
Yeah.
The county they are working on a transit-oriented development plan right now. They got funded they've been mostly focusing on the rail stations in the county, the light rail station, the MARC train stations in the county, but they also included the parole area where they are building a transit hub at the Annapolis Mall outside the city limits, but that design work is funded and moving forward. And so there is an exciting opportunity for transit-oriented development just outside of Annapolis in the parole area that we should be supportive of. And I've participated in some stakeholder meetings for that. So that I feel like one of the closest examples to transit-oriented development to Annapolis right now, but no.
Where are they looking to place that hub?
Well, they've located it wasn't my first choice, but it's at the Bestgate intersection of Bestgate and Defense Highway.
What?
General's Highway. It's sort of that corner of the mall where I guess there is a lot of surplus.
Really underutilized.
What?
That corner of the mall is very underutilized.
It is.
Used kind of for storage at the moment.
They're anticipating some build out of the mall. The mixed use type of build out is probably the future at the mall. So it will probably fill in around it. But I know there were other locations have been discussed over the years. It would have been nice to have one that was closer to the, I know at the corner of Old Solomon's Island Road and West Street was talked about at one point. And, but no, a lot of things have aligned for this location at this point.
Yeah, it's like our plan's going to be 2040. So we really should talk about somehow reintroducing transit into, regional transit into Annapolis. I was surprised when I read somewhere that Annapolis is the only state capital, I think, on the whole East Coast that doesn't have rail access, something like that. It's kind of shocking when you think about it, but I don't want to leave it out of our vision for the next 20 years or so. We should at least talk about maybe tapping into what's happening at the border. And I also think, this is just my bias, when we do like rail to trail planning, maybe we should do rail and trail, like not design anything that doesn't preclude transit in the future. Just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think they call that rails with trails.
Yeah. I don't think it should be either or in planning. We should always want everything, right? All good things.
Yeah.
Good point.
One more thing, Eric, I wanted to ask you. You were talking about that link that you're trying to build by College Creek coming in from the north. Although they call it West Annapolis, but I think it's kind of the north. Anyways, didn't the old right of way for the rail line from Baltimore into Annapolis have a loop that connected over to the Washington and Annapolis line, or is that loop not intact anymore? That
Yeah, there was a line from Baltimore that came in to the Wardour community through here.
Right.
It looped across College. There was an old College Creek Railroad bridge that connected, like kind of parallel to Rowell Boulevard, and then there was a station at Bladen Street next to St. John's College.
And I think that just west of the station, there was also a loop that it connected over going west. It looped into the West Street, whatever, that railroad, Washington and Annapolis.
The WB&A, yeah.
So
yeah.
you know where that is? Because I've walked that. Where the new Small Park Place Hotel is, just east of that, there is an embankment that goes kind of over the headwaters of I guess it's College Creek.
So that the track there's some track next to the Adams Elementary School. Is that part of what you're talking?
I think that's where the
Yeah.
loop was. I think that's
Yeah.
where it was.
Okay.
It was
Right,
a way to
because
bypass downtown and connect to the other rail line.
Yeah, the WB&A and tracks in the city and the B&A tracks actually connected. And as I understand it, people like Teresa Sutherland talk about being at Germantown Elementary and seeing tracks or trains on the popular trails in the 60s. And that's way later because the WB&A went bankrupt in 36. So there was connection between the B&A and WB&A tracks along the popular trail. Anyway, those rights of way are almost gone at this point.
And that's what I was wondering if
Yeah.
any of those are still existing.
You remind me, I've sort of cataloged some of that. I'll send you a link to what I've done if you're interested.
But Eric, great work on this. Very impressive.
Thank you, and those are good comments. You're gonna find other people here who are very much wanting to push the regional transit connections as well. So
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other commissioners have questions, comments?
No questions. I just want to say great work. I've been using the e-bikes quite a bit. I live in Homewood, and a lot of my neighbors have been using them, and I just think that's been a great addition. And I'm excited about what you're proposing with the Poplar Trail going all the way to Waterworks. I mean, stuff like that is just really exciting. So keep it up.
all right, great to hear. Yeah, we have I'm really happy with the relationship we have with Anne Arundel County, who they're actually trying to do the part once you get outside the city, and have been putting a lot of funding applications in. And so, yeah, they've been a great partner. So, yeah, appreciate you saying that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's an awful lot here, and I can't wait to review this again, just because I'm sure I missed some of it. So I appreciate everything you've done.
Mhm. Wow. Yeah.
And Eric, is this draft going to be on the planning and zoning website right away? Or is it still a draft?
I'll share this present. Yeah, I'll put this on the website. I could probably put it on tomorrow, but this is really more of a presentation. I mean, we're working on the plan document is something that we're trying to have for the end of September, but in 2 weeks when I come back to it'll be a shorter presentation, but I'm going to try to drill down to sort of what we've done and what are kind of the missing pieces right now in the actual plan document. But this is a good overview, kind of how we're dealing with mobility in general. But I can send this to you as well. I can email this.
Yeah, actually, I wouldn't mind if you don't mind doing that, because I especially want to share it with some people in Eastport that will love these advances, shall we say?
Yeah,
I'd like to have a copy as well.
Sure.
Hey, Eric, yeah, just send a copy to each and every one of us.
No problem.
And I'll use it. We'll use it for the committee, the park committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
Happy to do.
Thanks so much.
All right. Well, thank you, Eric. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And that brings us to the end of our agenda. Are there any other topics for the good of the order?
No.
If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.